Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be showing you how you can create an early warning radar network with exclusion zones to kind of automate some of the early warning tasks that you may have in a given system. So for the purposes of this video, what I decided to do is pick the island of Cyprus for this because it's an island. There are definitely other ways we can do this and kind of other general strategies, but I figured this was probably going to be a pretty good start for kind of getting everything set up. Obviously, if you're picking a country such as Switzerland up here, where you're going to have significantly more terrain to have to deal with, it gets a little bit more complicated, especially because you're basically bordered people. But for the purposes of this example, I'm going to try to kind of keep it sort of simple here. So the first things first is know what the difference between an early warning radar is and basically a fire control radar. The purpose of early warning is basically to give the rest of the air defense platforms time for the purposes of being able to actually identify a target and determine whether or not it's actually dangerous. Early warning radar does not have to be perfect. We're not looking for fire control quality tracks. We're just looking for something that's good enough that enables us to basically see if we even need to engage it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build us a really simple exclusion zone around our island. And I'm going to do 2 layers to this exclusion zone. And again, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to make this quickly here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one real quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and define this as the don't cross this line, otherwise we're not going to be happy with you line. So what I'm going to go ahead and head over to here, my reference points manager. And I'm going to go ahead and create myself a zone. And again, there's 4 different zones here. I'm going to select exclusion zone. I'm going to go ahead and go down here. I'm going to add all the points here. And you can notice here that we can go ahead and select the violators. Now, the interesting thing is we have 3 different types of violators here. We have unknown violators, which is just, we haven't identified them yet. Blue violators, that's the other team. And of course, we have civi violators. And one of the cool things here is we can actually define what we want to do with each one. So if we get an unknown in this range, I'm going to go ahead and slap them into unfriendly. If we get a blue in this range, I'm going to say unfriendly. And if we get obviously something that's defined as civi, we're going to order to be no change for this particular zone. This is kind of the orange zone, if you will, here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make the zone a little bit smaller because right now it's a little obnoxiously large here. Let's go back to the reference points manager real quickly here. Where's my zone? Exclusion zones. I can go ahead and click on it. And let's go ahead and validate. I don't think I ever actually validated it, but that's okay. Let's see here. Draw polygon. You can do. It's going to go ahead and do this. Sometimes this takes a second. Don't worry about it. Kind of a thing like that. And one of the cool things with all these zones is we can actually come in here and we can actually save these. So if you want to kind of save it for later on, that's something you could do if you needed to do. Let's call this not ADIZ. We'll call this ADIZ. Why not? Air Defense Identification Zone. Yeah, I like that. So it looks pretty good to me, and I'm not worried about it too much here. All right, so that looks pretty good. And let me just, whoops, I grabbed that 1 extra point. When you grab points, just watch out for it. So I've got my initial zone here. That's looking pretty good. I do want to shrink it down. Actually, that's a pretty good size. It's going to be just big enough to kind of give us a heads up that, hey, there might be something we're interested in looking at. Again, with time, I can come in here and kind of clean these up and make them a little more accurate. So what I'm going to do now is create my second layer of the zone. This is going to be the now you've done goofed up zone. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all kind of tightened up like this. And I'm going to really carefully attempt to select all these points. And it's probably going to blow up in my face when I go to make this area itself. But we'll see what happens when I actually build it. So reference points manager exclusion zones. I'm going to go ahead and create myself a new zone. And now let's see here. We have ADIZ. We have kind of the new one. We're going to add all the selected points on the map here real quickly. It looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and call this shoot me zone. Actually, it's not shoot them, but shoot it zone. So if you're a violator, you immediately go red. If you're blue, you immediately go red. And of course, if you're civi, we don't change. Civilian aircraft are not supposed to be shot at here. So what we've done now is we've created 2 of these zones. One is going to be our take a look at it zone, and the other one's going to be just kidding, shoot it zone. So that's actually going to work really well. Now, what a lot of people do at this point, too, and I think this is a very good piece of advice, is they'll come in here and they'll kind of clean this up a little bit, kind of a thing, kind of make it a little bit neater. A lot of times they'll kind of add more points along the edge to make it better along the coastline and stuff like that. But again, we're keeping this relatively simple for today's purposes. So I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm not going to change it or anything. Let's see here, deselect all points, looking pretty groovy there. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to be considering how we're going to detect targets. Now, there are a lot of really good choices here as far as how we're going to detect targets. And the strategy I usually use when building a scenario is I go ahead and shut off all these lovely layers like this, and I go ahead and turn on the relief layer. The reason I like the relief layer is because it makes it really obvious where I need to put my big radars. Now, when you analyze the terrain of Cyprus here, you'll notice I've kind of got the mountain range here in the middle. I've got this really long coastal range here, and I've got kind of the flat spot sort of in between everything. The other thing you'll notice, of course, is our biggest, most important strategic targets are all along the southern coast here, which makes it a little bit more challenging for us because we need to be thinking about protecting them more so than protecting things that we don't really care about, so to speak. So when I take my initial look here, I always like to put my most powerful radar on the top of the highest thing I can get my hands on here. And when I hold my mouse just there, I just notice I got something in the 6,000 foot range here. Let me zoom in a little bit, see if we can get a little more resolution. 6184, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go and press the insert key and click. Now, here's where things get tricky. Depending on your scenario, you need to decide what particular radar you're going to slap here. Obviously, I have the one I use for everything, which is a TPS 43, but we need something that's got a little more reach and maybe even some anti-stealth capability. Now, luckily for us, there's a great website for this, AirPower OS here, that gives us a beautiful list of kind of, I guess you want to call them Eastern radars for the purposes of detecting things that are difficult to detect. So you can go ahead and down here, kind of poke around through any of these, see if anything looks pretty good. I mean, we got some old P19s, we got kind of squad eyes. Oh, that one looks kind of interesting. Look at the size of that radar. That's a 29 November 6 there. I don't think we have a 29 November 6. 29 November 6. I didn't think so. But what we do have, if you type in the word radar, you can always add in a country. For example, if I'm going to do radar, obviously we're not going to have any. We might have some Cyprus radars. We do. So you'll see here that I actually have a good collection of these here. I've got the Big Bird radar, which is really linked to the SA-20. It's a really, really, really long range radar. It's not bad at all. 200 meters, this resolution rather. Let's see here, 300 kilometers. That's actually pretty darn good for that. We've got the Cherboyak. SA-17 is going to be smaller. We have a score radar. If I open this sucker up real quickly here, I can see it's a 60 nautical mile range. We'll need him later. Going down here, of course, we have the Snowdrift, the Canada SA-17, and then we have a TRS-2215, which is a pretty old school 3D phased array radar here. Now, there's one thing I want to throw out real quick if you hadn't been aware of. You'll notice that this is a 3D radar. The other types of radars you're going to encounter from time to time are going to be what they call a 2D radar, 2D. A 2D radar is not going to give you height information. A 3D radar is going to give you height information. The reason that's relevant, of course, is whenever you have early warning, height isn't as important. It's nice to have, obviously. A lot of times we can use a shorter range height finding radar to basically identify something that's, oh, okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, this is important because it's flying low for some reason. But again, we can go ahead and get kind of technical with that. So this is definitely our most powerful radar. So I'm going to go pop that right on the tippy top of this hill here. And again, I'm just holding my mouse to see it. And if I were to flip this thing on real quick, isn't it so beautiful in relief mode? It's pretty colors. If I pop this thing on real fast, you'll see that we get a range like that, which is more than enough. That's fantastic. And the nice thing, of course, is because we are on a hill here, we can actually look down. So we actually have line of sight down here into the coast. So one of the neat things here is if I actually go into a line of sight tool real fast, good way to cause massive lag here. But oh boy, here it comes. You can see my line of sight is fantastic. The only limited line of sight I have is really going to be along this coast, which is what we expected, but we'll fix that in just a few moments here, like I said. So that's going to be kind of our chief early warning radar. It's going to do really the work of everybody here, because again, we're on an island. It makes it much, much simpler. But one thing we did notice is we did have a pretty long gap along this coast, so we do have to provide some coverage in case somebody's basically going to skirt low altitude down here. So again, I'm just going to come down here on the surface. We're looking for something that has a little bit of redundancy. This looks like a pretty good spot right here. I'm just going to press the insert key again. A lot of good choices here. Remember I mentioned the score radar. This is at 60 nautical miles. It's also really modern technology, which makes it a little bit more useful for us. We also have the Snowdrift, but I'm actually going to go with the score radar here. Looks pretty good. Now, if we were to come over here and actually flip this radar on real quick, go ahead, sensors, turn it on, you'll see it's a relatively limited range on this. And unfortunately, I think I just made a huge silly mistake here. Air and surface search. I'm good. Okay, excellent. Actually, this works really well for us because it keeps out for boats too. So I like that. But you'll see now we have a little bit of redundancy as far as production goes. I've got this one over here. I've got this one over here. And let me just make sure that in map settings, I really wish it wouldn't reset those. Now, okay, it looks pretty good. And we also have a little bit of coverage as far as the surface goes, which works really, really well because I'm going to follow up with that radar actually on the other side of the island as well to give us a little bit of surface monitoring on this side as well. So let's go ahead and I'm protecting this particular unit. So I'll go ahead and pause that right there. Let's go flip that sucker on. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so we have some coverage there. We have some coverage. We kind of have a bubble of coverage up here as far as this whole coast is now protected. This whole coast is mostly protected. We have a blind spot in here. You can just kind of see by the terrain. And obviously, once we get something on this corner here, we will eliminate that blind spot as well. So let's go ahead and eliminate that blind spot. Seems like the best place to put something, but it's going to be a good spot for us. So go ahead and toss that thing there. It's going to get us good radar coverage in that direction. And let's go ahead and toss somebody on this other point here. Obviously, this is the first target for everybody with a weapon, but hey, that's what early warning is all about there. Okay, so now we have actually really, really good coverage here. So this whole coast is now covered. This whole coast is, well, not the coast so much, but obviously we'd have to put this up a little higher if we wanted better coastal coverage. But the key thing is here, it's going to be very difficult to get an airplane in here without being spotted electronically in some way. One thing I don't like, though, is if I actually look here between these two radars, you can actually see very clearly that the range in that one's kind of limited. The range in this one's wider. It's because that one's mounted higher up. But I'm noticing I have a little bit of a weak spot of coverage right there. So you can see kind of that redundancy. I've only got a little bit of overlap here. So I'm actually going to toss one more of those right down here in this little tip too. And the advantage to this, actually, we'll put it up on the hill just to give it a little bit better coverage here. And the advantage to this, of course, is it's going to be able to see, now we have a little bit of redundancy. You basically can't sneak up on this island. Let's see here. I see another hole. There's another hole. Obviously, this guy's not going to be able to see what. Actually, let's find out if he can see backwards. And again, whenever I do these things, this is usually what I do. Spend a long time running around making sure my coverages are good. We'll give it a second to go ahead and calculate. Yeah, we're perfect. So this radar can actually see over its shoulder backwards into this region here. And we have a little bit of extra coverage down in this direction as well. All right, I'm liking that. Everything's looking pretty complete. It's going to be very difficult to sneak up on this island. So the next problem I always like to solve is the redundancy problem. And one of the things people forget is that the first target of this conflict is going to be this radar. He's going to have a Tomahawk launched at it, or whatever the equivalent of Granite or something like that, launched at it in the first 5 seconds of any conflict, which of course makes this a very, very tasty target, which once this is eliminated, I lose that kind of long range coverage. So one of the things I like to do is I always like to put a portable radar kind of out of the way, assuming that the player isn't going to automatically know that it's there. So it's very tempting to pop portable radar here. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to Nicosia here. I'm going to go find the highest hill I can locate right here. And I'm going to go ahead and throw something that's a little more portable here. And I think a chairback is pretty darn portable, if I recall correctly. Late 90s technology. It's a fire control radar. It's very, very short range. It is guiding radars. Again, that's not too bad. Again, fire control, surface control. It's not going to be too bad. We could do a box spring. That'll do it. Box spring, those are massively long range. Yeah, we'll stick with that. So I'm going to go ahead and toss a box spring there. Actually, Big Bird. We'll toss a Big Bird. Why not? This is not considered mobile. No, it is considered mobile. The reason I say mobile is important here is because this little box, this is auto-detectable. This one's going to be an auto-detectable radar, which is not something we want. So just for simulation purposes, I'm actually not going to make it auto-detectable. I'm going to move it kind of, it's probably downtown sitting on like a pole somewhere. So at least the user might know that it's out there because of EW. But again, one of the things we can do with basically Lua as well is we can actually come in here and program this thing to only turn on if this one gets destroyed so that we have that kind of extra layer of protection. So I'm liking this. It looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to select all my radars I just created. Let's see here. I think I missed one. Yep, as I always do. Now I'm going to press the G key to go ahead and group. I'm going to call this EW group. And the reason I like that is I can turn the whole group on and off by a single press of a button. And that is very useful. I can actually sit up here, press OK, and I can click over here and press OK. That flips the radar on, and now you can see my lovely coverage, which looks really, really groovy right now. So I'm happy with that. And that's a pretty good collection of EW. Now, one of the last things I do with EW, and again, I've got all my zones here, and we'll go simulate some action in a second here. But one of the things I really like to do too is I like to set up a little bit of redundancy with some visual sensors as well. And one of the greatest visual sensors that you have at your disposal, by the way, I'm pressing the 9 key here so I can kind of ungroup everybody so I can see what it looks like, is the classic watchtower. So what I like to do is I like to go to facility, and if you actually type in watch, I'm sorry, got to get out of Cypress here. Sorry, Cypress. We'll do watchtower. And one of the things you'll see is there's literally a generic watchtower. And the generic watchtower, it's literally this little thing on a pole, basically. And unfortunately for us, our watchtower only has a generic spotlight, which is very, very limited. So one of the things I like to do is I like to come over here and like to throw on something really basic like night vision goggles or something like that. So I'll say night vision, and you can see some, nice 3rd generation night vision goggles. Let's just say they're nice, kind of a thing. And one of the things I'll do is after I'll plop that down, I'll hold down Shift and C, and basically I'll create a bunch of coast watchers. So I can basically have people kind of keep an eye on anything that's not supposed to be there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that one. It's not really a lot of stuff to stand on here. Go ahead and grab that one, and we'll go ahead and toss another one. He'll basically be watching the coast here. Right there, looks pretty good. And my coast watchers, because I press Shift C, if I open this up, you'll notice it keeps my night vision goggles, which makes them slightly better. And again, it's just that extra layer of redundancy. The final thing I'm going to do is kind of a new thing. This is kind of fun to play with, of course, and that's adding pickles. I'm going to go ahead and press Insert here, and I have a PCLS, Passive Coherent Location System. And of course, we only have a couple different groups that can do pickles. Pickles are really, really fun because it's basically going to be using radio signals that we just kind of picked up from just about anywhere for the purposes of detecting it, including things like FM broadcasts, which is really good. We have UHF and we have FM. This is pretty cool. We're basically going to be using radio signals to detect something passively. I really like these units. They're a great way to kind of annoy people who use too many stealth planes. So to use pickles, of course, we have to have line of sight on multiple locations. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and duplicate this a bunch of times. So I have 1, 2, 3, I can have 4 total pickles receivers. And basically we need some kind of civilian broadcast of some kind to detect it. There's no active sensors here. It's just automatic. But the important thing is you'll notice that it picks up FM. So if it picks up FM, that means we need to go ahead and throw in some civilian transmitters that are FM. So I'm going to go over here to civilian. I'm going to go switch back over to our relief mode. Again, relief is going to be the way to do this. Go ahead and shut all this stuff off. Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and press insert, and I'm just going to go throw in some FM towers here. So if I type in FM, you have these lovely little analog and digital ones. I'm just going to grab this one. And the cool thing with these, of course, is you have to actually turn them on. That's important. That's one of those goofy things that I always forget to do. It's a non-detecting emitter, so just be mindful of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss these around. This is Radio Cypress, kind of a thing like that, just kind of chilling like that. Looks pretty good to me. Looks pretty good to me. They're all turned on. That's what I want them to be doing. And now we have a little bit of redundancy for that particular purpose. Let's go ahead and save. And now we have ourselves a really, really, really effective little kind of early warning net. Honestly, it's probably too sophisticated for this purpose, but you can have an idea of how to make things difficult for the players. So red's ready to go. I'm happy with this. Let's go ahead and simulate now what happens. So I'm going to go switch to the other team here. I'm going to go up to Adana. Go press Adana. We're going to go ahead and add an airfield here. Airfield. I'll grab myself one of these kind of situations. I'm going to press OK. I'm going to go ahead and I just need something to start. We'll grab a couple different aircraft just for the purposes of kind of showing what this looks like in action. We'll grab ourselves an F-22 because science. Let's see. I don't know. I'll put some JDAMs in it. Internal, standard internal. That sounds good to me. And the purpose of this guy, of course, is just to basically irritate the air defense and I'll come back home. And of course, we'll grab a little more conventional and naturally F-16, CM, BLK 52. This is the correct F-16. I'll grab that one right fast. Keep it simple here. Actually, what I will do is I'll grab the harm. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to shoot the harm or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of do one of these things. Let's go ahead and switch to the other team real fast here. Red team. Whoa. We can shut the relief map off. That's going to burn my eyeballs. There we go. This is the map actually probably like the best. So one of the things you'll notice is immediately we pick up our lovely bogey here, and it gets picked up by the big bird, which is actually the radar here, which is exactly what we expected to do. So one of the things I'm actually going to do is let me grab one more aircraft here. Fine, we'll do another F-16. Doesn't bother me. Whatever. Like I said, keep this simple today. We're going to go ahead and do nice and low altitude like this. We're going to go do minimum altitude just to make our little system a little harder. And you know what? We might as well add a little boat too. Surface ship. I don't know what we're going to do here. LCAC would be fun. We'll do FFG 7. 07, actually. Oh, fine, be that way. We'll just grab an Adelaide, whatever. Australia, yes, I know. And we're just going to go like this. And the automatic pathfinding, we'll have to see the pathfinding. Basically freaking out, trying to figure out how to make that work. It's okay, though. All right, let's switch to red and see what we got. So a couple things we notice immediately. First of all the aircraft that we had flying at the time, we've actually detected at this point. They're all marked as unknown at this moment. We can see one bogey. We have no idea. Again, the big bird's doing the work here. We got this one right here. You'll notice our pickles is what's doing the detection here. Told you it works. And of course, if we go to this one too, you'll notice both our pickles and our big bird's doing all the work here. And keep in mind, there's going to be very little warning from that particular chap with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them go ahead and dive. You can see my F-16 dropped off. Of course, that makes perfect sense to us. The reason we know that naturally is because our radar, big bird doing all the work here, can't see through this mountain range, which is just part of the fun. One thing we notice is that we got an enemy skunk that's just kind of working its way down the coast here. Look at these two here. Again, just kind of skirting. And at this point, they're still unknown targets. They're just a little... Oh, we picked up the guy at low altitude here. And we probably got picked up again. The pickles is doing all the work here. Isn't that awesome? That technology is amazing. Now, the cool thing here is, remember, we have a little zone here, which is supposed to automatically flip them over when they cross the magic line here. So it's kind of one of those things. Oh, do you see how it automatically turned orange? So the cool thing here is we don't know what this target is yet, but we know that they crossed our magical defensive line here, which is naughty, naughty. And the interesting thing is if they accidentally cross within our middle line here, their status, even though we don't know what type of aircraft it is going to shift to the other status as well. Just kind of one of those convenient things. Now, one of the things I really like, and I'm going to go flip over to the other team real quickly here, is how much we know and how much we don't know. One thing we do know is we know the presence of the watchtowers, but we don't know where any of the radars are. You know, I'm just kind of looking looking like this. And you see there's a couple of the radars we picked up right away because those are the ones that are fixed and detectable. The other ones we didn't. So this just kind of gives you a good idea of just how effective our little defense is at making things a little more exciting for us. So let's go back to red here. This guy's about to cross into our inner line there, our inner territory, if you want to think about it. That's that exclusion zone. And again, we still haven't mechanically identified this target yet. There's too much cloud coverage at this point. We have a bunch of low clouds today to make things interesting. But the moment he crosses into that other zone, he's going to switch over to the other color. Uh-oh. So now we know that he's a hostile target. And of course, if we had radars and missiles, we could go start pop, kind of a thing like that. So as you can see, it's pretty cool. It's a neat little process. And obviously, this is going to take a lot of effort for the purposes of disassembling. If we didn't kind of take the time to sort of find all those blind spots, this wouldn't work as well. Naturally, if you were disassembling it, most of your work is going to be on finding where I put all of it. Then you can start the process of actually disassembling it. Enjoy.